Hi. Alright, so today we're going to talk about how do we factor trinomials when our leading coefficient does not equal 1. The video I posted the other day showed us how to factor trinomials when a equals 1. Now we're going to tackle what we do when that a does not equal 1. So let's start with an example with 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. So just as before, we want to identify our a, b, and our c. So our a is 2, our b is 11, and our c is 12. Okay. The next step that we want to do is we want to find AC, the product of our a term, so 2 times the product, times our c term, 12. We get 24. Okay. When we factor trinomials when a equaled 1, we only had to find the factors of our c term. Now we need to take that a into consideration. So I have 24, and I want to list the factors of 24. Now remember, we have the positive factors and the negative factors of 24. 1 times positive 24 gives us 24, and also negative 1 times negative 24 gives us 24. But if you look at your B, we're looking for a positive 11, which tells us that we don't need to list the negative factors. If you're unsure about whether you need them or don't need them, then put them in, and that way you're covering all your bases. But in this case, we actually don't need the negative factors, so we just need the positive factors of 24. So 1 and 24, 2, 12, 3, 8, and 4 and 6. Now we're going to take those factors and we want to find the combination that gives us our B. So same as before, which one of these add together to give us our B, which is 11. We can see that it's 3 and 8. With trinomials where your A is not 1, we need to do a little bit more work. We can't just take our 3 and 8 and drop them in like we did before. So we're going to rewrite our original trinomial, replacing 11x with our 3 and 8. So what we have is we have 2x squared plus, now that 3x plus 8x plus 12. What you'll notice is these two middle terms will always add to give you your b. You don't want to add them, otherwise you get back to your original equation, but we want 4 terms where the middle two give us our b 11x. Now we're going to use factor by grouping. With factor by grouping, you group the first 2 terms and you group the second 2 terms. And within the first 2 terms, we want to look and we want to find our greatest common factor. In this case, it's x. So if we factor out an x, we're left with 2x plus 3. Now we want to do the same with the second 2 terms. 8x plus 12, our greatest common factor is going to be 4. So if we factor out a 4, you'll notice we're again left with 2x plus 3. Now a good little check here is that you always want these 2 factors, whatever you're left with when you factor out the GCF from each group, to be the same. So we have a 2x plus 3 in both sets, and that's going to come together to give us a 2x plus 3 as one of our factors. The remaining terms, so our x and our 4, also come together into a binomial to give us our second factor. So 2x squared plus 11x plus 12 will factor to give us 2x plus 3 times x plus 4. So just to recap, we need to find our a, b, and c, and we're going to find the product of a times c. Here it was 24, so we listed then the factors of 24. We found which of those factors combined to give us our b, in this case it was 3 and 8, and we use those factors to rewrite 11x as the sum of 3x plus 8x. From there, you group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together, and we factor by grouping. In doing so, we end up with 2x plus 3 times x plus 4. Okay, so don't worry, we're going to do a couple more examples. Let's take a look at the next one. Here we have 12x squared plus 4x minus 2. So actually, you know what? I'm going to change this just a little bit. I'm going to make this 12x squared plus 2x minus 2. There we go. Now it'll work. So with all of these factoring problems, the one thing you do want to keep in mind is that you want to always factor out a greatest common factor before you do anything. That's just going to make the problem that much easier to work with. I'd rather work with smaller numbers. So before you do any sort of factoring, look and see if there is a greatest common factor. And if there is, then we're going to factor that out first before we get into all the other steps. So in this case, we can factor out a 2. So if I factor out a 2, I have 6x squared plus x minus 1. So that trinomial is a little bit easier to work with than the one before it because we factored out the 2. And that 2 is just going to keep coming down every step. We don't really do anything with it. It's just going to follow us throughout the process. So again, just like before, let's find our A, B, and C. So A, B, and C. Our AC then is going to be 6 times negative 1 or negative 6. Okay. Now we're going to find the factors of negative 6. So negative 1 and 6, 1 and negative 6, negative 2 and 3, 2 and negative 3. There we go. We want to find which of these factors combine to give us our B. Our B here is 1. So it's going to be negative 2 plus 3 give us our 1. Okay. Now we're going to rewrite our 6x squared plus x minus 1. So we're going to bring down the 2 that we had. And I'm just going to rewrite this as 6x squared. And then it's going to be minus 2x plus 3x minus 1. So again, if you take those two middle terms in pink and combine them, you get your B, your 1x. And now I'm going to take my first two terms, so these two, and my 3x minus 1, and I'm going to factor out a GCF, remembering that I have this 2 here also. So in the first term, if I factor out a GCF, it's 2x. So I'm left with 3x minus 1. Now in my next two terms, I have a 3x and I have a minus 1. You'll notice there is no greatest common factor between those two terms. So I'm just going to factor out a 1. Factoring out a 1 just means that everything's going to stay the same. So here, I still have a 3x minus 1. My quick check here, I have a 3x minus 1 here and a 3x minus 1 here, so I'm good to go. So I'm going to bring down the original 2. I have my 3x minus 1, and then I'm going to take my remaining terms, my 2x plus 1, and put them together so that my final answer, I have 2 times the 3x minus 1 times 2x plus 1. Okay, so let's take a look at one more example, and then you can obviously always go back and take a look at these again on your own, just to make sure you fully understand what you're doing. So if we look at 6x squared minus 11x plus 4. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look and see if you can factor out a GCF. In this case, we can't. So let's identify our A, our B, and our C. AC here is going to be 6 times 4, giving us a 24 again. I did not do that on purpose, but there it is. 24 for all three problems. So now if you look, our B is negative. So because our B is negative and 24 is positive, we only need to worry about the negative factors of 24. So in this case, negative 1, negative 24, negative 2, negative 12, negative 3, negative 8, negative 4, negative 6. Now we're looking to see which one of these combine to give us a negative 11x. So you'll see that to get a negative 11x, we have negative 3 and negative 8. And we're going to rewrite our trinomial to make it an expanded polynomial. So 6x squared, now don't forget the negative, minus 3x minus 8x plus 4. Okay, we're going to factor by grouping, so we want to group our two terms. From our 6x squared minus 3x, we're going to factor out a 3x. We're left with a 2x minus 1. And then from our negative 8x plus 4. Now I want you to just really quick pay attention. If the sign that is connecting both groups here is negative, you automatically want to bring down the negative. Okay? Now look at your 8x and your 4. What is a common factor between those two terms? It's going to be a 4. So what I'm really factoring out is a negative 4. So from negative 8x, if I take out a negative 4, I will have a 2x. And from 4, if I factor out a negative 4, I'm left with a negative 1. So the signs can get a little tricky here, but remember we always have our little check. We want to make sure that these two factors are the same, so we know that we're on the right track. If for some reason in this second factor you ended up with a positive 1 or a negative 2x, you just want to go back and make sure that you're factoring out correctly with the negative. So our final answer here, we have our 2x minus 1, and then we have the remaining terms, 3x minus 4, and so 6x squared minus 11x plus 4 factors to 2x minus 1 times 3x minus 4. So I think we've covered a combination of most types of questions that you'll see. You know, good old trial and error is another way to factor trinomials where your a is not 1. But in cases where you have a lot of possible combinations, it could take you a while. So this process of factoring by grouping, where you're rewriting your middle term as two separate terms based on what your AC is, will guarantee that you're getting the right factors each and every time instead of going through a trial and error process. So again, take a look back at some of these problems. I will online on my website also post some sample problems and answers in case you needed additional practice, but hopefully this kind of gives you a refresher and a reminder of how we factor trinomials when our a is not 1. So you can find Infinity Math Tutoring by Angeli online, or you can email me if you have any questions. Thanks a lot. Bye.